what was it like transitioning from an actor to a more executive role behind the scenes?
It was a lot of fun for me, actually. You know, I think it's a different skill set, and one that I felt like I always had. And you know, as an actor, I mean, you guys who are actors will identify with this. It's sometimes frustrating, always only being able to go out for the roles that are given or offered. You know, it's if you want to do something else, you're not able to stretch. You just have to do your best with what is casting at the time. But what's really nice about being a producer is you can create the entire world. You can, if you want, a Mexican American as one of your leads, you can make that. If you want 3 Asian Americans as regulars, you can have that. And you know, there are always battles to face, but in terms of creativity, I've been really pleasantly surprised at how possible it is through producing.
But are we saying that that is the only way for things to change? For someone to be able to start up their own company and to propose new ideas?
I don't think it's the only way, but it's a significant way. I mean, once you become one of the people who create, then you create in your likeness. I mean, I think so many white directors that we know of, you know, write about their own experience. I think about people like Woody Allen, for instance. You know, there's a lot of connotations about him recently, but back before we knew any of that, he was writing for the Jewish American experience, not because you know, he only wanted to include Jews, but that was his childhood, that was his life story. And so the more we have Asian writers and directors and producers wanting to share their lives and the world how they see it, then the more roles they'll create. And so one of the things I'm proudest about with Good Doctor is if you look on the screen there, you have society as I see it in America. You have, you know, white Americans, you have Latino Americans, you have Asian Americans, African Americans, British people. It's really a reflection of the new world. And what's even more important to me is that it's not really about that when you watch the show. It's just good storytelling. It just happens to be told by lots of different kinds of people.
Right. It's a reflection of the world as it is when you walk on the street. Yeah. Share with us a little bit about who some of your mentors are in this journey of being an actor and being a creative.
Wow. And when I first started acting, I have to say, like, there weren't that many Asian role models. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone here. Bruce Lee was someone that I looked up to and also had difficulty with because he was iconic as an archetype, but also a stereotype in America. So that was difficult. But the people I looked up to actually were African American. People like Sidney Poitier I respected a great deal. In fact, I have a little story I don't share very often, but I'll share it with you guys. I worked on a movie called The Jackal when I first started, and it was a really small role, but it was a guy who was a sniper. And it was with, the movie starred Richard Gere, Bruce Willis, Sidney Poitier, and it was also Jack Black's very first role. So, the first day I was working on set, you know, I had met all the stars, and they were appropriately kind of dismissive. I was in the lunch line, and Sidney Poitier was right in front of me, and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Poitier, I just wanted to say I'm a really huge fan, and you know, To Sir With Love is a fantastic movie, you know, and I Guess Who's Coming to Dinner I loved, and I love the kind of person you are as well as actor." And you know, instead of saying "Thanks, kid" and moving along, he actually engaged me, and we started chatting about his film roles. And not only that, he actually said to me, "Why don't you come back and let's get to know each other?" And we had lunch together that very first day, and that story always stuck with me because no matter how iconic or big Sidney Poitier was, he had time to talk to me as just a young actor, and you know, that to me was as big a modeling moment in terms of how I wanted to be as anything.
Right, it's really transformative that he gave you that time, that attention. Actually, he did put himself on a pedestal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the floor for some more questions. Here.
Hi Daniel. You took The Good Doctor from a South Korean format to make it into a really highly successful network show. Not something that's very easy anymore to create a really successful network show. Can you just describe the process of achieving this, the motivations behind it, the difficulties you faced? Did you meet any rejections before Sony and ABC took it up?
Yeah, I could talk for an hour just on that one question. But I will say that, yes, it started as a Korean format that I saw, and you know, my company is not in the business of taking only Korean formats, but this to me seemed ready-made to bring to America because it was a relationship story with a hero that we hadn't seen before. And for those of you who hadn't seen the show, our lead character has autism. And so, to me, that autism was a metaphor for anyone who was an underdog, or anyone who was overlooked, or anyone who's had a challenge where people wanted to dismiss them. And so, sometimes it's not just about race, it's about whatever your challenges are in life. And so, I thought that was a really great story to tell, and I thought that was universal. And I think, you know, I'm not the only one that thinks that, because Japan just started their own version of The Good Doctor recently, and it's doing well there. So, and it was the medical genre, and we've always had great medical shows on American television, like ER and Grey's Anatomy.
Which you're in.
Sorry?
Which you're in, ER.
Yes, I was, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. So, were there challenges? Absolutely. You know, I don't know how much you guys know about the American development process, but you hire a writer, and you have to get the rights to an intellectual property if it's something like The Good Doctor. And so we were negotiating with the Korean broadcaster. We brought in a writer who, incidentally, was Adele Lim, who wrote Crazy Rich Asians. And we developed it for CBS because that's where I was. My company was there at the time. And generally, well, I should say, once we pitched it to them, we went on a sales meeting to CBS and they rejected the idea. And so, and once that happens, usually the project goes away. But in this case, I felt so strongly about the project that I bought back the rights and redeveloped it, this time with David Shore, and then the rest is history. So, you know, I guess that's one of those lessons for me, and for all of you in the industry. You know, no one's going to tell you to keep going. You know, it's very easy just to give up, but if you really believe in yourself or believe in what you're doing, you have to have it within yourself to keep going. If I hadn't done it the second time, The Good Doctor wouldn't be on the air.
Is there another question? Switching gears a little bit, you're here on the jury as well. I'm just wondering whether or not you have some impressions of the content here in Asia. What do you think of the films that are being made here in Asia?
You know, I've been a fan of Asian cinema for a long time, and anyone who says that Asian cinema is, you know, second to the US just hasn't seen a lot of Asian cinema. You know, I'm looking at Anderson Lay over there, who has encyclopedic knowledge of all things cinema, and I'm sure he would agree that some of the best cinema in the world is from Asia. Would you agree with that, Anderson?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So, you know, even from the days of, you know, from my early days of kind of being aware of worldwide cinema, like Hong Kong cinema in the 80s is, to me, iconic, where one of the jurors is Stanley Kwan, and I've known his work for a really long time. Korean cinema, as some of you may know, it's among the world's best. And Singapore has made efforts, like significant efforts over the past, you know, years to kind of make themselves into a world-class cinema. And the movie we saw the other day was really fantastic. And obviously there's India, which, you know, is the second largest industry in the world. And Chinese cinema, now mainland Chinese cinema, is really, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys know all this. So anyway, next question.
I think some of the things, some of the problems that are facing Singaporean filmmakers, of course, won't be so unfamiliar to many of our filmmakers elsewhere. The money, every step of the way is difficult, finding people, finding talent. I suppose one of the last stops is actually getting screening in our local cinemas as well. I wonder whether or not you could speak to that. I mean, how would you help us to persuade, you know, the cinemas here in Singapore to be screening our own?
You know, that's a really complicated question because it speaks to the consolidation in general in the film industry, where you have fewer and fewer studios and distribution outlets and major studios kind of controlling you know, the number of screens that they're on and squeezing out smaller films. You know, countries do it a number of different ways. You know, certain Asian countries have had a mandate to have a certain amount of local films on their screens at all times. You can see what China is doing, and they're definitely encouraging growth in their local cinema. So, you know, I think you have to approach it a number of different ways. You have to think about the ways in which you can allow distribution, and you have to make good films. You know, and that's the thing. Like, we talk about race in America a lot, but the number one thing that we have to do is entertain. We have to be good at what we do, and we have to, you know, provide a good, I don't want to say product because that's not the right word, but project, and then take care of those other things as well. And I think that applies to your question.
Another question from the floor? Yes, a hand over here.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
Hi. Looking at all these books that we love written by Asian writers like Crazy Rich Asians, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, is there any book that you've read and being like, why aren't people making this a show yet? Or why aren't people making it a movie yet?
Yeah, no, there are a bunch. It's a great question, and you know, we're scouring a lot of literary IP, and I read a lot. I mean, I had no idea how much reading this job requires. At any given time, I have a stack of scripts to read like this. Some books recently that I've really liked. There's a writer named Celeste Ng who wrote a book called Everything I Never Told You. That's a wonderful book. Min Jin Lee wrote Pachinko, and that's a fantastic book. Both are being adapted into, well, one's being adapted into a series, the other's being adapted into a film. And there's just there's a wealth of IP, I think, intellectual property that is worth trying to develop, and you know, and we're doing that as well.
There's a question over here.
Hi Daniel.
Hello.
I have two questions. The first question is, as a producer, what are the different considerations when you're approaching a TV network or like a streaming when developing a project? And the second question is, if you meet your younger self, for example, 18-year-old, what would be your advice to him? Thank you.
Wow. That's a really good question. I'll start with the first one because that's easier. Yeah, no, whenever we create or develop a project, we are very conscious of whether we want this show to go to a broadcast network or whether we want to go to a cable or streaming company, because they're very different in the kind of shows that they produce. And even among cable and streamers, and there are very different personalities. Every network has its own brand, so to speak. And so do the broadcast networks in America. CBS tends to have a certain kind of show. ABC tends to have a certain kind of show. And I think you can kind of read between the lines and figure out what those are. NBC as well. So, you know, when we're developing, we often think, wow, this show would be great at X network. Netflix is different from Amazon, which is different from the cable companies. We just set up a show at AMC, and that was very specific over there. So, yeah, you have to definitely be aware of your market, for sure. What would I tell my 18-year-old self? One thing I will say is that if I knew how hard it was to succeed when I was 18, if I were 18 again, I don't know if I'd go back into this business because it really is hard. And, you know, I'm considered successful. So I would say, don't give up, because there were many times where I wanted to, and it would have been easy to give up. But, you know, I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk with you guys today if I did.
Except that it chose you, the industry chose you.
Yeah, I mean, I might have been a banker, I might have been a lawyer, but I don't know if I would have been a happy one.
You have kids. Do they want to be actors?
You know, it's funny that you asked that, because one of my kids just for the first time said he wanted to go into the industry, and I was like, no. But he never mentioned it when he was younger, but as he got older, all of a sudden one day he said he wants to maybe write and direct, and it just came out of nowhere. But obviously I can't say no, because that would be super hypocritical of me. But all I can do is try and support him in the ways that I can, and just let him know how hard it is. Because even if I wanted to help him, I really could only do so in a limited way. Because if I were to give him a show or to write, and he was bad, everyone would know it would be bad. So, you know, it's a hard business whether you know someone or not, and so, you know, I just have to prepare him for that.
I know the same. I asked this question because I have 3 kids, and my second daughter, she said to me, you know, Mommy, I don't want to act, I'm too shy, but I think I want to do voiceovers. And so in a previous life I was in radio, and I called up a friend and said, would you need a child's voice? And actually she did get it, and so now every other month she's saying, hey, when's my next VO? And I'm afraid I have to tell her that there isn't any coming for a while. I just wanted to ask, and you speak very passionately about, you know, reading, preparing, pitching those ideas, you know, and how do you see yourself dividing your time between your acting career and, you know, going behind the scenes?
It's a good question, because I've been thinking a lot about that myself. Once I left Hawaii Five-0, I took a break from acting, not because I wanted to take a break from acting, but because I was so passionate about my producing, and it took a lot of my time. And there were a lot of things that I was working on as a producer while I was shooting Hawaii Five-0 that I just didn't have time to see through. And so leaving Hawaii Five-0 gave me the time to really kind of immerse myself. And I think it's because of that that Good Doctor came to be. So it's now been, I guess, a year and a half, and I really haven't done anything. Well, I shot a movie, and I shot 2 movies actually, so yeah, I guess I've done some stuff. But it really hasn't been my emphasis, and you know, but I am now itching to do something on screen as an actor, so hopefully soon.
Okay.